right price, right quality, and exceeding the customer's expectations by outservicing everyone else. That was our secret sauce, which isn't secret. You have to treat your customer like gold, and it wasn't happening. So we just found the right opportunity, and service was definitely one of the strong value adds, which was so basic, but we harnessed and finessed it.
Hello and welcome to the Emerge Product Market Fit Academy series, where we're joined by leading operators and founders in EdTech to share practical insights and advice for early stage founders. If you're building the future of learning and work, then this is for you. I'm Zara, and I'm joined by our guest today, Shailu Tipparaju. Now, sharing a short overview of Shailu's background is no easy feat. He's a serial edtech entrepreneur and is one of those extremely rare individuals who has founded, scaled, and exited not one, not two, but 4 successful edtech companies. Now, this is a much abbreviated version of Shailu's remarkable track record over the last 2 decades, but to share just a couple of highlights, his extensive experience includes founding EdAssist, providing education benefits and student loan support for employees. They served over 600 enterprises, processing $1 billion in tuition management dollars annually, and were acquired in 2010. Shailu also founded Examity, a world-leading online proctoring solution acquired in 2019. They recently celebrated their 10th year in business, serving over 500 clients in 120 countries. They've supported over 20 million exams to date. Now, 90% of startups fail, with a staggering 30% falling flat in their first 2 years. Shailu, you've beaten those odds 4 times. So I'm looking forward to digging into your learnings from those experiences. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's jump in. You started your career at Xerox, and over the course of the 7 years you were there, you led several successful global initiatives at Motorola, Delta Airlines, and GlaxoSmithKline. And in 2005, you were Xerox's top performing employee worldwide. It was from there that you started your first company, EdAssist. Can you paint us a picture of where you were at that point in your life and career, and what made you leave Xerox after 7 years to take the leap of starting a company?
20 years as an entrepreneur educator, and you wanted to summarize in 2 minutes. So let's dive in. It's a pleasure to be here, Zara. This is Shailu. And just to make sure the audience is clear, I'm actually a day one entrepreneur again. As of this month, this is my first month as a first month entrepreneur at Magna Executive Education. We just began the journey. And let's dial the clock back to the days of Xerox. The goals, ambitions, and circumstances, I think, are the 3 things that create the first journey as an entrepreneur. The circumstance was I was in the Xerox learning department, shared services, and we were in enterprise learning. The goals were how do we create value from the opportunity that you watch around you? We were delivering learning to companies like Motorola University and others, and said what can be taken from there for workforce education. Every entrepreneur has this first step into ambition that powers their drive, the independence, the flexibility, the drive to create an identity of their own. Mine was no different. So, from a journey as a software professional turned software architect turned entrepreneur, workforce education was the first step. It was called EdAssist. That's where the journey began. So, the circumstance led to a formation of a goal. The ambition all came together. It was perfect timing, and EdAssist was the outcome.
Inspiring to hear about that journey from Xerox to EdAssist, and your first of many successful startups. So to kick us off today, Shailu, I'd love to know, did launching a new venture become easier each time? Did your previous experience give you a head start with the early stages of company building?
It's a dual-edged sword. The success from the past helps you significantly give you tailwinds. The market reputation, the customer belief, the team belief, and they want to get on board with the next journey. So those are the tailwinds that help. The double-edged sword is the same experience and depth could make you rush into things and not judge all the angles and make some assumptions. So those are things you watch for. The second one is the expectations are super high. It is one thing when you begin the journey, it is a whole different game to begin it again. I have been through the circle a few times. Lesser pressure the first time, incredible pressure the second time, but there are tailwinds to help you get through that process. And yes, you don't have to worry about money as much and have to prove something. So there's always that benefit of cushion to balance that discomfort and get back to the ring again. Because that's once you taste this success, you get back to the ring before you know it and find other avenues to express that.
I assume one of the benefits of founding a company multiple times is developing certain frameworks based on your experiences. So you're dealing with these expectations and other things that make it more difficult the second, third, fourth time round. But at the same time, from your experiences, have you developed certain frameworks over the years?
Frameworks have been evolution organically over time and very deliberately in the last 5 years. One of the things that we would see is in the early days of creating companies as entrepreneur, you're focused on the value proposition. You're just excited about that, and you do not carry so many frameworks. You just react to the environment and respond very quickly. Over time, mature entrepreneurs build what we call the value chain, the inside as to how do you deliver it. So those are the frameworks that not only accelerate your time to entry into the market, it actually provides faster value to the customer and the consumer. And it also makes a stronger framework to build bigger companies at scale in not only one geography, but different industries. Frameworks are what I call the concepts. The awareness of where value is added is what I call the context. So that's a good glue. The framework puts the concept and the context together to deliver value.
Well, I'm excited to dive into your concepts and frameworks as we now move into the heart of our conversation. Today, we have a lineup of 3 topics to discuss. 1, how to conduct effective customer research to identify their pain point. 2, once you've identified a customer pain point, how to approach building a solution for it. And 3, once you've built your MVP, how to acquire your first customers. Let's jump right into the customer research side. Shailu, for every startup that you've launched, you've had to deeply understand your customers' problems. One of the top reasons that companies fail is because they haven't done this effectively. Could you walk me through your approach to customer research to truly understand the problem that you need to build for?
If you think about what makes companies work successfully and repeat that success over time, right in the creation phase, then in the acceleration expansion phase, and even the transition succession phase, is understanding the true needs of the customer on one end. Let's call it the door. Understanding their true pain points, understanding their goals and ambitions, and making sure that we don't assume anything about that door, but comprehensively list each of them and not mix up the needs versus pains, goals versus ambitions, and separate them out and organize that as the who are we going to serve and what are their key needs. The right side of it, let's call it the solutions, the what. What are your keys for these doors? What is your value proposition that specifically addresses the needs, that specifically has an alleviation to their pain points, faster workflow, better delivery? What is their specific goal as a provider in the industry? What can you do on the keys, the value proposition? And the middle of this is the value creation is how will you deliver this? We never walk into engagement with a customer prospect without preparing these three things. Who is the customer and who is the consumer? What are their needs, pains, goals, and ambitions? What is our solution? What is our value proposition to address those specific needs, pains, goals, and ambitions? And how will we create value together? It is not going to work if we walk in unprepared into these things, because the questions that come out of this preparation, what we call the solution clarity, that the customers feel familiarity with, they understand us.
And how do you know when you've collected enough customer feedback from those 3 boxes? Is there a metric or milestone to reach before you start building an MVP from that research?
This is actually one of the trickiest ones where serial entrepreneurs, first time entrepreneurs, investors struggle from saying how much is too much. So the key to say is, are we looking in the right place? Are we looking in the right direction? Which is, where are the customers and where is the delivery? Is that close enough to each other? Most people do where it is convenient for them, not where it is convenient for the customer and the consumer. So where you would stop analysis is making sure that two needs, two pains, two goals and ambitions. 5 to 6 is more than sufficient to understand and create at least 3 compelling value add solutions to these three things or five things. Beyond that, you can incrementally go over time and add to the list, but creating too many in terms of interaction with the customers because they're so different types. And we'll also talk about the focus on which customers to hone in on. Where you would start getting the rubber on the road is making sure that you have enough with 3 to 5 needs, pains, and goals, 2 to 3 very compelling solution elements for those in a way that's absorbable. The human mind cannot handle more than 5 to 7 things. So if you have 15 solutions for the customer, it's overwhelming. And also, it is overwhelming for you to build something called an MVP. So the key is to know strategy is effectively knowing when to stop and when to start acting on it. So that's how I would see that frame. One of the great learnings from a favorite professor of mine at Harvard, Professor Ranjay Gulati, is he calls it the innovation with a capital I. That is what we talked about. Then you get into the incremental innovation with a small I. So the capital I is making sure that you have enough to create something that offers immediate value and consumable. And step two is the iterative innovation, where there's no such thing as stopping the research, but finding out. It also makes you not make too many assumptions, but get the direct feedback from the consumer customer and iterate to a better product, better solution, better service.
The faster you can iterate, the stronger competitive advantage you have with being able to iterate on the customer solutions. Could you shed some light on how you approach solution development? How do you stay focused among all the possible ideas, conflicting feedback, feature requests you might be getting from customers? You mentioned this metric of 3 to 5 pain points at first before you start building a solution. But how do you prioritize between those pain points, what to build first?
Always value creation happens on the customer's terms. What I mean by that is we make choices on behalf of the customer, thinking this is what I think is their most important thing. Surprisingly enough, we don't ask enough in the marketplace what is your priority. The customers will give you their priority over time, and sometimes it's conflicting. But if you listen closely enough, there will be a theme of the pain points or external research versus your own internal observations as to is it going to bring their product to market fit faster? Is it going to increase their consumer experience because they have end consumers they need to service? Is that going to increase their experience of their solution? The key is there is effective listening. We can have a whole workshop on effective listening on the customer's voice. But in terms of solution building, do not build the key and hunt for a door. Make sure that you knock the right doors, you ask the right questions, you find the right size of the key, and then go manufacture the key. It minimizes what we call experimentation because experimentation is an incredibly expensive initiative, and strategy is meant to minimize experimentation and get to the product faster.
Touching on the customer research side, you said the key thing is really understanding and listening to customers, which is what people get wrong a lot of the time. I suppose another part of that is the concept, Rob Fitzpatrick's book, The Mum Test, that the questions you ask can also be leading in a certain direction, and you're not always getting the true responses from customers. So when you're building a solution, right at the precipice of when you start to invest time, money in developing that, how do you really confirm that the solution you're building is the true feelings of the customers rather than what you've led them to say based on biased research questions?
I like the way you mentioned biased research is when we're asking questions, we typically want them to confirm what we already thought we knew. A more open-ended one is saying, we this is how we understood your need, goal, pain. Is that accurate? Before we even get into how will we address it. That question is, I think the framing of that question by saying, this is what we think it is based on the information we collected, fills in the blanks very effectively. And second, the customer is a very broad word. The consumer is a very broad word. You have to understand in that broad word, have you gone close enough to the right customer? So there's three types of customers. One is the stakeholder customer, the actual user of that solution, and the enabler, the gatekeeper. Not all of them will define the problem the same way for you because each one has a different view of the same problem. So you have to segment and make sure that you account for all three, the enablers, the actual users, and the stakeholders, and marry these three answers and see where are the trends that see alignment and where are the trends that see agreement. So it's a kind of an alignment agreement thing. At least three interviews with three user personas get you a better clarity, because the CEO of a company would give you a whole different perspective versus the procurement in HR versus the actual user.
I'd love to jump into one of the examples of how you took the research that you gained from customers, particularly getting many different perspectives from people throughout an organization, and started actually building a solution from that feedback that you got.
Let's take workforce education automation and later Examity. The purpose of EdAssist was automating the workflow in a professional who wants to go back to learning, be it a degree, a certificate, or just in time learning. And enterprises had this budget saying, we want you to upskill, become a better workforce. What is the friction in the process is which one to go to as far as institutions, how long would it take, how much would it cost, what is the approval process, and how do I get the reimbursement process. So there's a financial aspect to it, there's a guidance and counseling aspect to it, and there's a transactional processing aspect to it. In terms of our research, we went and made sure that we picked up obviously the learning from my enterprise experience, and then we put a team together to ask the feedback from what is the strategic initiative on workforce education from the management and stakeholders, and ask a question on what is your outcome expectation when you send your workforce for learning. The second, we take actual engineers, managers who are going for their MBA degrees, their MBA, their PhDs in metallurgy, and say, what is your outcome when you go back? Academic fulfillment, getting a promotion, very specific questions will get you specific answers, not a broad change the world questions. And in the middle, we say, you have used this. This is not new. Workforce education is not a new concept. It wasn't new in 2005. So, what is the pain point for the enablers? Are they seeing too much noise? Are they requiring too many signals? We just have to ask, what has stopped you from going out and procuring a provider? And what would you expect as a good outcome? I think bottom line is, if you define your assumptions and map it to the outcomes expected by these three components of users, enablers, and the stakeholders, you would get a better one. So EdAssist was an outcome of saying the challenge for the user was the whole, I don't want to pay for this upfront. It costs me too much money. So we enabled upfront payment from the enterprise. Universities didn't have a good platform to pitch to the enterprises. So we enabled a platform for the conversation, and we provided advising and counseling. We provided a seamless, frictionless transaction. So technology was given as a solution. Last but most important is for the stakeholders, the summary of this is the money you spent from your budget, and this was the outcome as a result of the spend. That is what they're looking for.
You touched on this idea of when you were getting these insights from the customers you were interviewing, they weren't necessarily new concepts or new insights. You were validating concerns, validating assumptions, building out your hypotheses. And what this is leading me to is that founders often build things in competitive spaces. You don't necessarily need to have uncovered something that no one has ever realized before. For example, with Examity, you weren't the first online proctoring solution, right? Yet you emerged as a world leader in the category, outlasting many of your original competitors. So how did you go about building a sustainable competitive advantage?
You know, the concept, what we call the fast followers and slow leaders. When you come into the space where academic integrity is not a new concept, I mean, you can connect the dots backwards so conveniently. 2013, we began. 2013, May, we are 10 years old. When you look back at what worked, we did not create the concept of someone has to be proctored. It's been done for ages. What we have taken is from a competitive advantage, the five forces of Porter's. I'll use some of those frameworks, which is one, we created a refined consumer experience. It is not fun to go through that whole proctoring experience. So, what are the friction points for a student, a test taker? Simplify the wait time, simplify the onboarding time, simplify the noise that will disrupt them taking from the test, and increase convenience and access. So that's the refined offering experience. The second one is substitution, which we give alternate options for the consumer and the customer, saying there's multiple ways to do it. So you became a differentiator, not just a price differentiation, but a channel differentiation. And third is, as a customer, you give them negotiation power because now you can choose not one type of proctoring, you can do multimodal without switching providers. We were actually surprised. There was three, four varieties, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry flavors, and the user had to go through three, four flavors. And we said, what's the way to provide all of that in a unified experience? And last but not the least, I think the supply chain management in enabling that as a competitive sustainable advantage is right price, right quality, and exceeding the customer's expectations by out-servicing everyone else. That was our secret sauce, which isn't secret. You have to treat your customer like gold, and it wasn't happening. So we just found the right opportunity, and service was, I think, definitely one of the strong value adds, which was so basic, but we harnessed and finessed it.
I love that approach of out-servicing the customer. Touching on something else that you mentioned, with something like Examity, and this is a common thread with many edtech companies, often you're building a product where your customer, in this case, for example, higher education institutions, is not actually always the end user, for example, students. How do you balance the expectations, requirements, ambitions, goals of those two stakeholders?
So, from a stakeholder, I think even the delivery channels, the universities that sign up and eventually enterprises that signed up, they're looking for outcomes that specifically they want out of it. Number one is reputation. They want to make sure that the provider is taking care of the tactical things on the ground. And we ask, what is your single expectation? Learner convenience, institution reputation. You don't have to write a big 10-page thesis or a 100-page book on it. You have to condense it to words that are easily translatable. And the reports that come out of technology, the voice that comes from the customer has to resonate with, are we promising learner convenience and are we delivering on it? Are we exceeding expectations? Are we giving reports to the universities and enterprises where they feel if I hand it to Examity, they got it covered? The trust is what has to be established. It's an easily used word, but incredibly hard to run over 10 years. To establish trust as a sustainable advantage, we call that credibility advantage. People don't switch. You and I, being consumers, we don't switch once we are attached to a product that is credible, that is compelling, and trustworthy. From a price advantage, it's very hard. You can't stick a price advantage for too long because a lower price product can come and disrupt. But when you add credibility, trust, and experience, it's not easy to displace.
And does that credibility and trust extend to the end users, i.e., the students actually experiencing Examity as well?
100% from a, that is where the quantum of greatness, which is the company I'm working on, so that Magna is inside my DNA now. You have to begin at the end user. If they wait too long, if it is a disruptive onboarding experience, that noise becomes a deafening resonance up in the stakeholder world. So we had to make sure we had this tag on the walls: no exam student test taker left behind. It could be 10,000 exams or 100,000 exams. Every test is very unique to that student to graduate into some program to get a job. So why are they taking this was far more important than are you using a Mac or Windows or are you using a webcam. Those were training tools, but the reality of why are they doing this interaction was super critical for us.
And I guess it was precisely because of that approach and putting the students first that you arrived at processing, is it 20 million exams to date through Examity?
So if we look at volumetrics, I think for me, every transaction is more of an interaction of our brand to the world. And even today in a meeting earlier, I was telling our team, beginning with the first set of customers and interactions with Magna, I was telling, make that interaction as your whole world because it is. And I think we treat that at very large scale in millions right now. We haven't forgotten where we began. We have obviously scaled up across many divisions. So the value chain has enhanced significantly. So when we begin a company, we are in the value proposition world, everything we talked about. But when the value chain is created very strongly, it can sustain to millions and millions of transactions.
And going through those millions and million transactions, I would be really interested in hearing over time how that product adapted based on the feedback you were getting, changing needs of the consumer. What are the key changes over the last 10 years that you've seen Examity go through, and what sparked those changes?
If you look at the macro first, I think industry shift also has to be a key voice for you that ripples into the partners and suppliers and buyers. Their needs are also an important constitution over time because we use many tools to bring this together. We are a cohesive force. So the industry change, the partner, supplier, and the supply chain changes. The customer demands and needs and goals, ambitions are not written in stone. That would be ideal, but they evolve in reaction to the industry changes. So the consumers and customers change, their needs change, the suppliers and partners, their needs change, and the industry is also evolving from where it began. Back in the day, if it was the pitch to say, catch the cheater doing the wrong thing, we just re architected the message saying, give convenience to the learner and multimodal. Now it has evolved into what are the academic goals of the learners? What has changed? Assessments have changed. We need to adapt our proctoring delivery, proctoring technology, consumer experiences to meet these new needs. And it's still in the next wave. So I think staying ahead of the curve is easy to say, but there is a group focused on researching these changes, a group focused on servicing the consumers and customers, and the group focused on evolving technology to match those needs. And these groups have to be inside the value chain, communicating very actively. And the fourth voice is the outside voice, which is not just claiming we are the most awesome company, but let the customers say that. What I call marketing is what you say, branding is what they say. So focus on branding and voice from outside. Make sure that your marketing and branding is aligned.
That's a great approach with the alignment of the marketing and branding. Honing into the customer side of things now, we'll move to the final segment of our discussion. So we've covered the customer research side, we've covered solution development. Now, once you're armed with research and you've built out an amazing product that you're really excited to share with the world, how do you find those first customers?
Oh my, I'm experiencing that now, which is kind of fun as a day one entrepreneur again. The delivery channels become clear to you. These are the roads you drive on, the highways. These are the delivery channels. How will you bring the product to the customer? The customer persona is an important factor. That I call it the macro versus the micro. At a micro level, you need to define the user persona as to who is the customer I'm servicing. If we take executive education right now, there's much talked about growing industry, phenomenal attention globally, but we can't service every executive entrepreneur in the world. That is such a broad definition. So you need to hone in on what is my focused single user persona who can take immediate value from this solution. That would be a first customer. So the first thing is defining that persona at least in 5 to 10 criteria as to this is what I call my beachhead customer, rather than saying change the world, which is amazing. We all want to change the world, but whose world would you change first? And find the segmentation of before you go and say there's a gap in the market, make sure that you know that there's a market in that gap, and make sure that you find out which kind of entrepreneurs are looking for executive education, for example, in Mac. What's the size of their company? What are their key needs? Are they scaling? Are they transitioning? What would be a typical revenue size? What would be their spend velocity? What would be their appetite and willingness to pay? Is my solution matching to that? So the first customer is obviously the thrill of adventure. But if you just get within the known network, that doesn't really validate it. What I call the first customer is someone you do not know is able to get the value proposition, and then the channels come after that. So, user persona, clarifying your assumptions, zone in on the focus of this is the customer I would serve. Even if an opportunity comes from the network who's not your ideal, have the discipline to say, we will get to you right now, but we will not deliver to you right now. That would be the way to do it, which is if an IBM came, I would love to have IBM as a Magna customer. Why not? But what would be more impressive is to get a YPO, which is one right now, to say they have a ton of entrepreneurs who are scaling. They would be my ideal customer. So the definition leads to delivery channels. And I think that would be sustainable over time in the first, not only the first customer, but the first 10, I would say.
When you've built something that you're just so excited about, and you've built this revolutionary solution to a real problem that you've validated, there can be a temptation that I've seen among founders to say that this can deliver immediate value to multiple different stakeholders, multiple different segments. How do you prioritize? Because there is a temptation to think that because it's such a great solution, I can service multiple segments at once. How do you prioritize which segment to go to first?
I would tell you the world as I see it, because that's the only lens I have. I'm a more focused and disciplined guy. I would rather deliver outstanding value to a smaller segment of customers and that voice become the brand than try to be many things to many people. The advantage of being a serial entrepreneur, as we began the conversation, is that we do get multiple inbound and said we all want to be a customer. While it is enticing to say, let me do that, you need to scale a team that is capable of delivering to those different sets of customers. You need to scale your solution channels and technologies to deliver to those different expectations. And then you need to be able to keep sustaining that delivery. If you're unable to do that and just sign up, you would end up not being your best. And the market would say something different than what you are saying something about you. So, what you tell the mirror has to be excellent input, not right now. I think I call that disciplined entrepreneurship.
I love that concept of disciplined entrepreneurship. So now we've got the three parts of the customer research, the solution development, and finding first customers. Let's put it into context. So we'll take your most recent venture, Magna. Can you talk us through those three sections? So, firstly, let's look at the customer research side, and then we'll move on to solution and finding first customers. But with the context of Magna, talk us through how you approached customer research.
First of all, thank you for choosing the most recent one because it's fresh off the oven and it's I can smell the cake. Magna as an entrepreneurship education company, the purpose is to bring together three important forces in education and entrepreneurship together. One is great researchers and educators on one end of the triangle, on the pyramid, entrepreneurs and executives on the other end, so they can interact, and partners in the education space and technology who can bring this interaction together. So the framework of learning, connecting, leading to meaningful collaborations. That is the mission of Magna, to connect these three folks. And the purpose itself, the deep purpose is how do we build kinder, better, sustainable companies as a legacy and handoff to future generations and make the world a better place, starting with the quantum of greatness in every entrepreneur first. So, if you look at executive education and entrepreneurship in particular, the research begins with how do you define your world of entrepreneur for the solution that you're going to create. So, let's define the door first. Are you servicing startup companies who are just taking off the ground? Are you servicing very seasoned scaling companies, or are you servicing the IBMs and Apples of the world? You have to be clear on who is your customer as a definition. So the criteria we used was a specific set of revenue targets they are at right now. So seed companies are first 10 mil or hitting their first series A or B. We had that research and bucketed people into which geographies are we seeing most adoption. Is it Asia? Is it Americas? Is it in the Europe? So we did the geography and the appetite. So the research coming into it was, where are you seeing incubation cells? Where are you seeing venture capital firms, and how is their investment thesis? And what are they saying about it? Venture capital and angel investors are cutting big checks. Now, you don't want to give the checks to companies who have not proven anything outside of a compelling pitch. So we said, what do they look for? And they said, this is almost like a teacher that is assigned to make sure that our investments are protected. And this was even unintended, but very nice. Venture capital became a source of research for us. Being a venture partner in Emerge obviously worked to my advantage because I was observing that in action, how companies are pitching, what else they can use as scaling and networking frameworks, and what else can be as a student entrepreneur. So that research led us to believe segmentation of beginner entrepreneurs, scaling entrepreneurs, and seasoned entrepreneurs, and each of them have different needs. It also led us to the second part, which is once the research is done, we segment these customers when they come inbound. Is our solution meeting their creation needs, expansion and acceleration needs, or transition and succession needs in that order. So there's somebody who may be looking for exiting, somebody is looking for expanding in a different geography, and somebody saying, I just want to create a new one. I have sold my company, I'm just walking to create a new one. So we found these user personas on. We could deliver to all three, but the recipe has to be consistent across the three. So we don't have to create too many distinct products, but one consistent one.
Fantastic. So you've shared the customer research side of Magna. Let's move on to the solution development. How did you take that research to build out the solution that Magna is offering?
The first way to think about a solution is a platform approach. We talked about the delivery channels. In the new age of consumption of education, it is personalized education, it is on the terms of the consumer, and it's adaptive, which means thanks to the new generation technologies, the delivery of it was multimodal, it was hybrid, it was remote, it's virtual, and it's in person. But how does the platform deliver all of these? So the learning workshops, the business workshops, and the introductions of collaborations all came through in the same platform, regardless of what type of consumption you want. We understood their needs, goals, ambitions, and pain points, and created one platform that said, here's where you can do on demand learning, here's where you can do interactive connections with your network of preference, here's where you can do collaborations, and here's where you can do in person one to one business workshops or remote one to one business workshops, but all happening in the single platform. Now, we do not provide everything within our own self creation. We are an aggregator of best in class technologies and put them all together into the workflow of Magna.
I was going to ask, how did you manage to build all these solutions at once, but you're aggregating those solutions? So if you were building them in house, you would have prioritized one or two and then built from there. But as an aggregator, one of the advantages is that you can offer all of those things at once.
The Laws of UX, one of my favorite books on user experience, is people spend a lot of time in their world. When they walk into your world, speak the same language. So people are using tools, conference tools, scheduling tools, learning tools. We just need to know the best of all those tools. And what new age companies have to focus on go to market is creating a workflow that integrates all of these tools and makes it seem like one experience. So that's what we did.
Taking all of that research and the solution that you'd built and offering all of these different things as an aggregator of great technology solutions, how did you then find your first customers? Was it a case of going back to the customers that you researched at the earlier stages and saying, hey, we've built this based on your feedback?
We had, thankfully, all the prep did help early success faster than we predicted as a team. We are now scrambling to scale very rapidly, which is the discussions we had itself led to becoming them as a buyer. So before we had to create a sales channel, they became a buying channel. So I think the reason is when value creation is compelling, my approach to selling has been create a value so compelling, create a brand that is so appealing that the users would come to you to buy. And this is the ideal world, but this is happening right now, which is they say, having gone through the value add from you, we did give them a taste into the entrance without putting high barriers. So we removed the frictions to enter and said, consume this. What do you think? And they said, we have already tasted early success. We had a collaboration. We met someone amazing. And we got one of your frameworks. The application instantly got attention in the market. So we had buyers coming in as a result of research. So research is only thought of as collecting information to build a solution. Research could be a powerful tool if you share it with the world openly without displaying a lot of your IP. It is a compelling force. And lastly, on your first set of customers, there's a ton of appetite on stealth mode that many folks celebrate. I'm more of a don't stay in that mode too long. There is a thing called timing. You need to open up to the world and say, we are open for business. Come on out the doors. And second, don't make the noise in the wrong areas. Make sure that you're making the signal in the right areas. So if there is reputed education firms that are doing their workshops in the future of learning in generative AI, we were right there saying, this was what we found. This is who is the ideal customer. We were literally putting the blueprint of our customer right on the homepage. They don't have to hunt for it. And lastly, on buying patterns, we made the buying much more simpler than drawing them into contracts. People think contracts are a great way to draw customers in the B2B space. It just increases the cycle. No one likes to read 70-page agreements. So we made the buying process simpler. And the first dozen customers just came as an outcome of simplifying the buying process.
You had a lot of demand to manage at the same time when you announced Magna to the world. One of the things that you touched on earlier was trying not to be the solution for everyone, but being the best solution for one segment first and expanding from there. Do you have an example with Magna of hard decisions you had to make with prioritizing segments as you started off?
Yeah, this would sound less humble, but I'll say that anyways. I think the trust and respect that a serial entrepreneur earns over time is the market did reach out, and some incredibly high revenue in excess of $200 million wanted to be a customer right off the bat. Even though we love to have those customers, it doesn't match with our thesis of who's our ideal customer. They would be not today. And our response was, would absolutely want you in the doors. Right now, can I solve your one immediate problem or pain point and get you satisfied? Knowing that when we build the team to satisfy that demand of a revenue at that scale, we will be there. Now, two things would happen. People would say, oh my God, why would you let revenue off the door? You could sell the plane tickets and build the plane later. Customers respect you when you say no. That is a very hard, disciplined entrepreneurship that we take away, and they say, I'm glad you said no. In fact, there's someone else of this definition of who your ideal customer is. Can I introduce them to you? And say, absolutely. I think it builds credibility by saying no. It is one of the hardest things for first, second, third, or fourth time entrepreneur is the discipline to say no.
And would you have done the same thing whether it was your first venture or your fourth, fifth venture?
Maturity comes with time. I think when it is the first time to say that I had this much clarity would be an unfair assessment of my own history. So we may not have had this discussion. I wouldn't be welcome into your world to have this conversation. But I think the new age entrepreneurs have advantage of conversations like these. It's amazing work that you are putting together for the academy, and they are leveraging this learning. We stumbled our way into it, and now we are sharing our wealth of knowledge. First time, as a first entrepreneur or first EdAssist, I will give that example too. We had Northrop Grumman reach out from the EdAssist website and said, we want to be your customer. You would not say no to that. So we said yes. We killed ourselves servicing, and it still is a customer and one of the most satisfied customers. But if I had to play back my time machine and go back to 2005, with this knowledge, I would have said, give us some more time. It would not have been as painful to get to the goals that they were looking for.
You wouldn't have been as worried about losing them forever. You would have been comfortable with saying, give us some time. No, it's fantastic. And it's because of people like you that are happy to share their learnings that founders who are first time founders have this wealth of knowledge to pull from other people who've been there and done it before. You've shared a lot of really valuable insights. Let's move into the final part of this discussion today, our quick fire round. So I'm going to ask you a quick one-line question and you respond with a one-line response. You ready? Who is your biggest inspiration in the education space and why?
This would take you 3,000 years back, so brace yourself for the time machine. The teacher is called Chanakya. He was one of the earliest teachers. I come from India, and he used to teach kings on how empires are built. I've always been an avid reader. His name is Chanakya, and he was a philosopher, teacher, statesman, and an advisor to kings. He's always my favorite teacher.
What skills or knowledge areas should education focus on to prepare students for the jobs of the future?
The jobs of the future would look for a multidimensional personalities, which is part technical skills, part personality skills, and part global awareness. What's happening out there is going to impact you here. So having these three dimensions of technical, personal, and most importantly, global awareness is what they need to do to prepare for the future.
You've had many successes in the startup world, but I'm sure you've experienced both ups and downs. What's the most valuable lesson that you've learned from a failure?
It's not even a sentence, it's simple. People. It's not the what, when, and the how, it's the who. If you have the right people on your team, they can get through anything. And from my failures, I have learned that sometimes I've made assumptions about people and gotten to the team too fast. Sometimes I wasn't I was slow enough to not attract the best. So I think people would be at the core of, if I had to do differently, I would get someone into my team sooner. I would get someone out of my team faster. That would be my lesson.
Now, that was a response worth breaking the one-liner rule for. Finally, what emerging trend in edtech excites you the most right now?
I think the trends of education are, this is by far the most exciting time to be in the education space. Ed tech always has to know education before technology. So the new age technologies are enabling the heart of education, which is personalized education, interactive education, and immersive education. I think that's where the trend is going. I cannot believe we finished an entire conversation without using generative AI and chat GPT. So there, I did it. But the purpose of that is to enable these three, which is personalized education, interactive education, and immersive education. Any technology we do from K to 12 to exec ed is seeing these three dimensions evolve.
Great, we've ticked the box on Gen AI. So personalized, interactive, and immersive. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shailu. It's been fantastic having you join us today and share your learnings from your remarkable journey. Really appreciate your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Zara.
Thanks for listening to the Emerge Product Market Fit Academy. If you enjoyed this episode, please like it, follow our channel, and if you're feeling generous, share it with a friend.